keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage, and I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares, nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling them flares. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch a scenario on stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away, asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursue it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio, once again with your host Nick Bernabe here on UCY.tv. Thank you all for tuning in and welcome back. We had an awesome show on Monday. Despite the technical difficulties, we had an awesome guest by the name of Andrew Demeter on the show, and he actually had an interview with the kid that shot the video down in McKinley, Texas, and I'm sure everyone's aware of this story, but basically it's where the cops showed up to a pool party and started manhandling a bunch of kids. Anyway, that was a really exciting show for me, and you know, it's really nice to get down to the bottom of what's going on, because you know there's all this propaganda being thrown around everywhere, and you know it's really hard to tell what's the truth and what's not, especially when we're relying on corporate media or hearsay. But to get the evidence right from the source, you know, that's always a really great way of you know, seeing through the nonsense. Anyway, if anybody wants to join the call tonight, we're going to be taking calls about halfway through the show. We're going to have a special guest on to talk about some things that I'm sure everyone's going to be interested in, to say the least. Maybe a little controversial for you, or maybe not. But if you'd like to join, we're hoping to have a debate later on, so keep that in mind. If you want to call in, the number is 718-717-8296, or you could add us and call in on Skype, the Anti-Media, and you can find us there as well. Make sure you check us out 5 days a week, same time, same place. I do the show Monday and Wednesday with my co-host DD. He's not going to be in tonight. He's got some personal business to take care of, but I do have another guest in the studio tonight. Randall, how you doing, man?
Good, brother. How are you doing?
Not too bad. So we met not too long ago, but you really impressed me with some of this art that you do, and you know, well, it's poetry, but to me it's still art, and it was really refreshing to hear some truth being said.
Word.
You know, and it's really entertaining, and it's really deep, if you ask me.
Thank you,
but
brother.
in a few minutes here, we're going to see if you can open up our show with a little bit of this spoken word poetry, and hopefully our audience will enjoy it. I know I do. And then we're going to go into some news stories, because there's, like always, a bunch of crazy things going on with the news. And tomorrow is going to be a big news day for us as well, so make sure you guys check out the antimedia.org tomorrow. And then I just want to give a quick shout out to Ponder and XL for our intro and outro music. Hooking it up for free, some local artists, some local musicians from San Diego that really provide us with some cool content. And anyway, let's get down to it, man.
All right, dude.
Let's open it up with some of this spoken word.
All right, so this one goes: Too many lives have been hypnotized by ignorance that subsidizes corporate lives while leaving us high and dry. And if you're really seeking the truth, but confused by where you can find the proof of why we live our lives behind broken lines that over time became forged into our minds, I just want to live peacefully and ponder on thoughts of ancient philosophy, teaching things how they're supposed to be, allowing the mind to be man's strongest entity. While watching the news, I know it's not hard to lose hope in our politicians' views, for they do abuse the lives that they were supposed to help thrive. So please look beyond the bribes that have grown to the size of a ginormous enterprise, influencing human lives dictated by those that demoralize so they can make their millions and die. For only reality is relevant to those that are living it to be prevalent, and to expose all that it meant for humans that all came from a different descent should have meant something greater than another nation being controlled by their government. And when you look back at America's roots, you will find long geographical loops of human organized groups selling the 7 seas so they could break free of oppression and poverty. And I know it might seem as if freedom is just a dream, or just as likely as descending to heaven through a supernatural light beam. But when you take a second look at all the work that it took for shit that we just read in a textbook, you'd realize that our lives are not defined by the divine, but by the human mind. So the next time you find yourself in a bind, just remember there's nothing more powerful than the almighty mind. Shit, without it, I wouldn't even know how to rhyme. There you go. That's one of them.
Yeah, man, that was awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then, you know,
so what do you call that one?
That one's, I mean, usually I just, the names of them are just what it starts out. So that one's Too Many Lives. But, no.
So in case anybody that's listening right now wants to find your work, where they can find, like,
yeah, if you go, yeah, I mean, on my Facebook, on my notes, if you just type in Randall Byers in San Diego, on most of my notes, I have at least like 14 of them on there. But I'm eventually going to put out a book. I just want to self-publish, so until I have the funds to self-publish a book, it won't be a book. But no, it's definitely, I've got 42 of them, so they're definitely ready to be bound.
Nice, man. Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to publish a book. And
Yeah.
the cool thing now, especially with the internet and like this technology, self-publishing is relatively,
ebooks.
it's a lot easier than it used to be.
Yeah.
And before, to get something published, you'd have to go through all this red tape, and you'd have to deal with these publishers, and you have to deal with the people that print the books.
Yeah.
Most of these are big corporations. If you're critical of them, or if you make something that makes them look bad, they don't want to print it. And that's what to me is so exciting about the internet, is it frees up a lot of this creativity and a lot of this. A lot of these ideas, and it lowers the barrier of access, right? So a lot of people can
really
put it
gives,
out there.
and it gives you a platform that wasn't there even 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, it gives you a platform that you just have a much broader base of, just reaching out to so many different people. And I did a lot of poetry when I lived in New York, and when I lived in New York, that's when I was doing most of it. And it's funny just the difference between living in the West Coast now compared to the East Coast, and the kind of effect I feel like I have with my poetry. The East Coast, I felt like they kind of like latched onto it a little more, and so it's nice being on the West Coast and actually doing it outwardly, because I've just been writing and writing and writing. So it's definitely nice.
Yeah, man. 20 years ago, you'd have to be on like a soapbox somewhere and stand me up, and hopefully 20 people walking by will hear you. And tonight you're on, the Anti-Media Radio, and we have, thousands of people listening right now.
Oh,
and
a beautiful
so
thing.
It's awesome that we're able to decentralize and lower the barriers of entry and allow people with, an awesome message to have their voice heard.
Yeah, and no, it's acknowledged and appreciated on my side too, because it's definitely not an easy thing just to kind of throw yourself out there if you're not used to doing it.
So you want to do one more before we jump into these?
Yeah, I got one more for you. This one goes, sometimes this world seems to be too much to handle. I find myself walking through life with nothing but a candle. Some will get everything but work for nothing. Some will work for everything, and that's how they feed their passion they live and breathe. Money's the material that controls our minds. If you're anything like me, you've got good at counting dimes, while millions of people's ideas are just passed down the lines. We the people are who creates how we define this life in its most essence being. So keep your eyes wide open and soon you'll be seeing how not giving a fuck is what put us in this rut. But they allow ignorance to fill their cup, and to be honest, it's been filled a bit too much. Oh, the cup that runneth over, how it's affected our loved ones and our soldiers. Freedom is a state of mind that we as humans could easily find, but the government tries to keep us blind so we stay confined. I hope we go past enemy lines. We won't even have to go beyond our country's borderlines. The actions we make today will someday reflect what the future will have to say. And maybe it won't be such a mystery of how all things came to be. Hopefully the next generation reads a piece instead of what we as teens were taught to believe. Why is it so obscene to expose all the lies that makes you want to cut the ties, but surprise, you couldn't see it because of its disguise? Even if you could see it, you don't know what to do. So step aside while I slide by and explain to you why there are so many people dying, why there's so many people crying. Does this mean we're the generation of the dying nation, or is it just miscommunication? I can feel the government suffocation. Is this the reason for all the tribulation, or do we need to relearn what it means to be patient? I wish the ignorant would take a hint of what it means to be intelligent. Then I bet they might even give a shit about our one and only environment. They might even throw up a fist for something of worse with structured ethics. And while I expose the scrolls words to attest to those ancient beliefs we put to rest, could they affect it what was best? I guess it doesn't matter. We settle for less. And this horrible mess won't be fixed till we confess. Us as individuals all have our own quest to find meaning in this life and to go through it with no disguise, because that inhibits the demise that the politicians put on our lives and will eventually expose what it means to live free lives. And that's that one. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
That one's a little more of a tongue twister.
Once again, another awesome piece. Dude.
Thank you, dude.
So hopefully everyone can find you online. Before you leave, I'll grab a link to your profile.
Sure.
I'll drop it into the chat room on the radio website.
That'd be awesome.
Anyone looking to.
And I'll update some of those too for you guys.
Nice. Sure.
Yeah, I've got a whole grip that can go on there.
So I want to invite you to stick around for the rest of the show. We're gonna have another caller on in a few minutes.
Sure.
Talk about Bernie Sanders, and that's going to be, to say the least, it should be an interesting debate.
Wow.
But I also got a few news stories right now that I want to cover, and feel free to chime in on any of this stuff.
Word, brother.
And if I don't hear you chime in, I'm going to ask you what you think.
All right. Well, I will be expecting to.
So this first story, and to me, this is something huge, and I'm actually working on an opinion piece on this for the Anti-Media tomorrow, so I've definitely got some opinions on this stuff. But this it kind of makes a lot of things make sense, so to speak, as far as the recent developments that we've been dealing with when it comes to foreign policy and stuff like that. But just today, it was announced that the U.S. has now become the world's largest gas producer. We produce more oil and natural gas now than any other country.
That's
and
crazy.
What many people don't realize is that Russia was the biggest country up until just this year, as far as producing, fuel and stuff like that. And a lot of people will say that Iraq was about oil and all these wars are about oil and stuff, and they're right. But now we're starting to see that the U.S. is now becoming this huge oil player. So what does this mean for our foreign policy? And that's really what I wanted to get into tonight with this story, as far as deciphering what this means for us. And
Raping our own sources?
Yeah. So first off, let me pull this story up on the Anti-Media. I should have already had it up. But there was a recent EPA study that came out, and it was basically showing that according to the corporate media, it was basically saying that fracking doesn't affect our groundwater.
Yeah, which has been literally scientifically proven that it does.
Exactly, and it's fracking is a really controversial topic, and fracking is mainly the thing that has fueled America's rise to become the biggest oil producer in the world. Now a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, that's a good thing. We don't got to import oil and all that kind of stuff. But is the price worth it that we're supposed to that we're going to pay environmentally? Or the other thing that's been linked to the fracking as of late is earthquakes. Man, we're starting to see earthquakes in the Midwest, and they're starting to see earthquakes like in places like Nebraska and Pennsylvania and stuff like that, where like earthquakes typically don't take place. But since they've been fracking for the last several years,
has that happened in other countries though? Like, has that been like an issue with other countries that are producing massive amounts of oil?
See, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah,
but the thing is that the U.S. is like by and large one of the biggest fracking, destinations.
Yeah,
in
that's
the world.
our like main tool of getting that oil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now, here's the thing about this study, and I want to talk about first the way it was treated by the mainstream media. The New York Times had a headline: "Fracking has not had a big effect on the water supply," EPA says, while noting risks, which is the most accurate headline out of the bunch. NPR: EPA finds no widespread drinking water pollution from fracking. Washington Times: EPA: fracking doesn't harm drinking water. And then Politico: EPA: fracking no big threat to the water. Now here's the problem with these headlines. And now the study itself from the EPA isn't horribly biased, but it takes looking at the finer details to realize that it's not a conclusive study, because it only takes into account voluntarily reported information. So what we're talking about is that these fracking companies are giving certain data that they want to the EPA while keeping other data secret. And the way that they're allowed to do this is because they say, oh, well, the stuff that we use for this fracking process, it's a trade secret. So we can't divulge the details of that, because then people are gonna steal our ideas.
It's kind of like The Magician, like where he, like, I mean, if you ever like watch Houdini, like that guy was like, he astonished even politicians because they couldn't figure out why he was doing what he was doing. So they're playing pretty much a magician move right there. Like you,
more or less. That's a good way of putting it. Man. And it's like, yeah, well, we can't tell you about what's in it because then it'll give up our secrets. And so basically this...
But it's all a trick.
Yeah, exactly. So basically this study is like pretty much inconclusive, but the way the media treated it was like, oh, this ends the debate on fracking. Fracking is perfectly fine, this, that, and the other. So, I mean, that's the first thing to me that really got to me. Secondly, there's been so much other information.
Yeah, like Gasland. That wasn't that whole thing about fracking, and like didn't HBO do? I think it was even like a 2-season documentary on it. Are you familiar with Gasland?
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Is it a documentary?
Yeah, it's one of those HBO documentaries, but it's to disprove fracking. I'm pretty sure. I remember when it first came out, but yeah, that was one of the most controversial pieces of things that they had about the fracking that I can remember.
Yeah, man. Then you got those people down in like Louisiana and stuff where their drinking water is like becoming flammable. And things like that. It's like, and you guys are saying this stuff is okay? And now to get down to what fracking really is, I mean, it's basically what they're doing is they're, forcing water mixed with a bunch of chemicals, and there's even radioactive material going into this, and they're forcing it into the ground, causing fractures in the Earth's crust, and then that releases a bunch of methane gas, and they recapture it. And so just thinking about that, it's like, dude, these guys are cracking the crust of the Earth.
Yeah.
And the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is out here kind of more or less in a way by omission. They're saying, oh, this is okay.
Yeah.
And the reality is that a lot of people are kind of not having it. A lot of people are kind of fed up with this fracking stuff, and it's been destroying communities. We posted a recent story on the Anti-Media about Denton, Texas, where they passed a local ban on fracking in this town. The town said, okay, we're not going to allow fracking in our town anymore. And so the oil company instead of trying to deal with the local community, they went to the state legislature, got a new law passed that said, we're banning bans on fracking. So they banned having bans on fracking. So now the oil company went back into the town, and they tried to recontinue their operation.
Yeah.
But the citizens of the town went in there and sat down in front of the gates to get into this place and started blocking them from getting in. And they started getting arrested, and then more people were coming up and sitting down, and they were getting arrested, and so it's a...
And it's a big power play. Like they know that they have those abilities to be able to just go straight to the government and be like, you know what? It's one of those issues where it's not about the citizen anymore. It's not about like me and you and the people living in Texas. Like it's about, oh well, we need this to be passed. We know this guy that's gonna pass this, and well, fuck you.
Basically, man, that's one of the big problems that we have right now is that these corporations are really just jumping into bed with the government, and it's no longer like an open market or whatever you want to call it, a free market. It's kind of very much a controlled marketplace, and the people don't have any say.
But I feel like this has been going on since Rockefeller, dude. Like, I mean, Rockefeller, he played more in the political role in the stuff that the battle between him and Carnegie is just nuts, because it was like, I mean, obviously they had their industries, but a lot of it played on a political side. So you see that resonate even then, and now it's just built up to this mess.
It's just gotten worse.
Yeah,
that tends to be what happens, is that things slowly get worse, but they get better at hiding it. Yeah. And now they have these anti-monopoly laws and stuff, but we still have plenty of monopolies.
Yeah, but even whenever they took the gas from what was it, American Oil, and they made him literally sell off to like 7 different gas companies. But he made more money because all 7 of those gas companies gave him residuals. So he was actually making more money than just having that one. Exactly. Like it's a solution to a problem that creates a bigger problem. And
it's kind of very, very in the same way the way Monsanto does business now. And most people listening probably are familiar with Monsanto, but they control a huge portion of the food supply, 90% of the corn, 85% of the soybean, and I don't see the government breaking up their monopoly, and you wonder why. Well, the guy that is the head of the FDA used to work for them. Yeah. The guy that's supposed to be regulating this stuff used to work for them. It's called regulatory capture, and it goes on in basically every industry once it gets big enough. Yeah. And even companies that are awesome, like companies that provide awesome services like Google and stuff like that. I mean, Google executives work within the Obama administration.
Absolutely.
So there's a huge conflict of interest going on there. And so the way I want to shift this story, the fracking stuff, I mean, it's horrible. I personally think fracking is environmentally horrible. Cracking the Earth's crust just doesn't sound like a great idea to me, especially now since we're getting to the point where we're not going to really need this oil stuff as the solar technology continues to get more efficient, cheaper. I just saw a study 2 days ago where there's like 6 metropolitan areas now in the country where it's more economical to use solar than it is to rely on the gas companies and stuff like that. So we're getting there where we're not going to really need this stuff anymore. But there's a big roadblock in the way, and that's really what I wanted to talk about. And that roadblock is the petrodollar. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the petrodollar, but the petrodollar was basically set up back in like 1971 by Nixon. And what it was the U.S. basically went bankrupt trying to fight the Vietnam War and stuff, and they couldn't pay for it. Back before 1971, all U.S. currency was redeemable by gold, and it was called the gold-backed currency. Yeah. There was a gold window. And if you had $100, you can go change it in for $100 worth of gold. Yeah. And that's how it used to be. But in 1971, they spent so much money that they could no longer provide the gold to back up the currency. So they said, okay, Nixon said, okay, from now on, we're going to establish the petrodollar instead. We're not going to back it with gold. We're just going to we're going to basically tie it in with oil. And that's when Saudi Arabia became a big player, a big ally of the United States. And that's when this whole synergy started forming. And ever since then, you've been seeing the U.S. go into all these countries like Libya, Iraq. They attempted it in Iran.
Even Africa right now. Like Africa Nigeria is getting hit hard.
And so this is kind of where I wanted to go with this thing where we're creating the most gas now. And I want to tie it in with what's going on with Syria and Ukraine, because these are two big pieces to the geopolitical puzzle that could factor into this fact here, because we didn't become the world's biggest oil producer overnight. You know what I mean? Analysts, people that are in the know, they knew this was coming, and they knew that because of all the fracking, they know that we're going to have an excess. Yeah. Last year last year the United States produced 90% of its own fuel use. So we only imported 10%.
And that blows my mind. I had no idea that it was to that extent. Like
90% in 2014 was the oil we used was produced here.
Yeah, no, that's insane, dude. And that's, I mean, it blows my mind because, I mean, if we would have had the tapping in those resources 10 years ago, would have Iraq or any of those wars even been something that we would have looked at? Like, we would have been like, oh shit, we don't need oil. We've got oil. What are we going to do with that? Like, so it definitely makes you kind of think, well, now that we have that resource locked down, is that going to kind of give us a little room to not have to get so much into foreign affairs, which I doubt it will, but it's wishful thinking.
Exactly. And that's the first thing I thought too. I'm like, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
We don't got to go blow up countries anymore to steal their oil. It's like, cool.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that isn't what's happening. And so now this is what I've been seeing happen. And we've been saying this for like a year and a half now, but more and more analysts, more and more insiders have been saying the same thing as of late. But this whole thing in Syria, man, we got to look at Syria and what it is. And so, to give a little background information, Russia, which, as I mentioned before, was formerly the largest natural gas and gas producer in the world.
Yeah.
Now, for those that don't know what's going on with Russia and Europe, Russia supplies most of Europe's gas, and Russia has basically a monopoly on supplying Europe.
As a whole,
with gas. And so that puts Russia in a very influential, a very highly leveraged situation where they can turn up the prices or they can cut back the supply, which they've done,
and before. even have a lot of play in the politics too.
Exactly.
Huge play in the politics. I mean that gives them a whole platform to kind of be like, oh, just make sure this happens.
Exactly, and so. To go in chronological order here, let's talk about Syria first. And like I said, we've been talking about this for a while. There's been plans to build a pipeline which goes from basically Saudi Arabia and the Arab Sunni states, which are all of those are our allies, despite the fact that they're huge human rights abusers and they're just horrible dictatorships for the most part. Yeah. They've been planning on building a pipeline which goes from Saudi Arabia, basically, up. And it has to go through Syria because the only flat ground route into Europe has to go through Syria from the Middle East.
Yeah.
So this is the main reason, from all the research that I've done, the main reason why we backed the civil war in Syria was to overthrow the government of Assad, which has been a long-term ally of Russia. And he's been blocking this pipeline for a long time. And he said, you're not building a pipeline through Syria. And the main reason is because
my homie in Russia.
Our homies in Russia, they got a monopoly on the gas for Europe, and they don't want any competition. They give us money, they give us weapons, they give us tanks, helicopters, and we're going to do what they say.
Yeah.
And so I'm not trying to say Russia is doing the right thing. I'm not trying to make excuses for Assad, which is the dictatorship, the dictator of Syria.
Yeah.
But we got to remember that all this stuff is kind of geopolitical. And so as soon as this unrest pops off in Syria, what did the U.S. do? They said, oh, this is our chance to go and overthrow that government. And then we can finally build this pipeline that we've been trying to build so we can finally contain Russia.
Yeah.
Right? And so they went in immediately. As soon as the uprising started against Assad, the CIA goes in. They start, training the rebels, funding the rebels, arming them through their proxies in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey to try to overthrow the government of Syria.
Yeah.
And and people say, oh, well, there's no proof. Well, yeah, there is. There was just a recently declassified report from the Pentagon that came out several weeks ago that we covered extensively on the anti-media that shows that in 2012, the intelligence services of the U.S. understood what was going on. They knew that what they were doing could give rise to ISIS, but they knew that what they were doing, ISIS could help them destabilize the government of Assad.
Totally.
Now, it doesn't say in the report, we're going to do this to build a pipeline, but that's the only logical reason why they're going to be doing. Why in the hell else are we hell-bent on destroying a government in Syria when at the same time we have a government in Saudi Arabia committing very much the same crimes.
Oh, if not worse.
Exactly.
Like I would say worse. Like, and that's definitely, and definitely does not make any goddamn sense. That's for sure.
And so then, this is what's going on in Syria, and the U.S. is basically, we're going into Iraq now. Obama just announced today that they're going to send another 500 people in there.
Didn't we have people in, like military people in Syria, though? I remember reading something about us actually having troops in Syria. Like, has that not...
There's no acknowledged troops in
Okay.
Syria.
Okay.
In Iraq, we have like 10,000,
Yeah.
what they call military advisors.
Yeah.
They're troops in Iraq, which, and they've been flying missions into Syria and stuff. So, we are using military action in Syria.
But we don't have, like, grounded troops per se.
No troops on the ground,
Yeah.
quote unquote.
Okay. Okay.
But a lot of what we've been seeing now with this battle against ISIS is that it's more or less not doing anything. ISIS is still making gains. They're still capturing towns. They've captured like 3,000 Humvees from the U.S. supplied Humvees,
Yeah.
and it really, to me, it seems like we're not. Even though we're being sold that this war in Iraq, we're going back in to go defeat ISIS. The Pentagon report basically makes that look like bullshit. And it makes it look like, we don't care so much about ISIS. What we care more about is carving a pathway through Syria to make this pipeline.
To break the pipeline.
And then this brings us to Ukraine, man. In Ukraine, very similar situation. There was an uprising, and as soon as this uprising started, we went in once again, started funding the rebels, started arming the rebels, started training the rebels, and now it's turned into a civil war, just like Syria is. And the whole reason, the reason why both of these places have turned into civil wars is because you got the U.S. backing one side, and you got Russia backing the other. Now, Ukraine borders Russia on the western side. And now the thing about Ukraine and why it ties into this whole pipeline talk is because Ukraine is where all of Russia's pipelines get distributed through.
Really?
So if Western-backed powers are able to take control of Ukraine, they can put a stop to those. They can turn those pipelines off.
Yeah.
And so the whole reason I bring all this up is because all of this coincides with us becoming the biggest oil producer in the world. So if we're becoming the biggest producer, doesn't it make sense that we want to cut off the second biggest producer, our biggest competitor?
I mean, according to history, that would be definitely correct, and yeah, no, totally. That would be the first play. That would be best case scenario in a politician's mind is, all right, well, this is our number two. Let's just take care of this guy, and it'll be nice sailing from there. And no, I think that is the agenda for sure. Like there's no doubt that that's the agenda, but it's just getting everybody to understand that is the agenda. That's the trick. It's not the reality that most people see, like, at all.
Yeah, man, I agree with you. We got someone keeps calling and trying to troll us.
Nice.
Anyway, yeah, man, and the thing to me that's really scary, dude, is that it's like we're going in and we're making these civil wars in Syria and Ukraine, and we're talking in Syria. There's been like 200,000 people dead, and there's been like over 2 million people displaced that had to flee the country.
Yeah.
In Ukraine, we're talking 50,000, 100,000 people dead. Full-on civil war, man.
Yeah.
And it's all being done, from what I can tell, is for geopolitics, for big business, for establishing basically oil trade routes. And back in the day, they fought wars over trade routes and the Silk Road and the shipping lanes. Yeah. And there's been wars throughout history. And now they're fighting wars over pipelines and stuff. And and the thing is that the scientific, the science backs it up, man. We posted an article in the Anti-Media that was a study about, the countries that have had these civil conflicts, and anytime an external force intervenes, it's 100 times more likely that if an external force intervenes in a civil war, it's 100 times more likely to happen if that country is rich in resources and mostly in oil.
Yeah. Oh. I mean, but that just like allows that kind of lifestyle to flourish. Like without that, like reality that it wouldn't be so easy obtainable. Like, and that's where you've got to look at those countries that allow that to just be a lifestyle. Like, and I mean, not that America is the most sought after lifestyle in the world, but it's still something I appreciate on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and,
like,
I talk about this on the show fairly often, man. And like, the U.S. we may do egregious things overseas and stuff, but in the end, we're living in the bubble.
Oh, totally.
We're basically the modern day Roman citizens that get all these perks and stuff. Yeah, maybe at the loss of blood to other countries in the Middle East, just like the Romans did, but we get to benefit from all these perks and stuff like that.
Oh,
and it's
definitely.
Really sad, but it's something that definitely happens.
Yeah.
I want to move on here before we bring our other caller on. Anybody interested in this geopolitics stuff, I mean, do some research. Look it up yourself as far as what's going on in Syria and Ukraine. It's a lot more than meets the eye. The whole story we're being told is like we're going in there and giving them freedom. We're saving these people. Their dictatorship is oppressing them and stuff. And so we're just going to go give them democracy. That's all this is about. That's what we're being told.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But at the same time, like you have to question it because it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. The people, we shouldn't support countries that are doing egregious abuses of human rights. But then you're like, oh, but we support Saudi Arabia, we support Israel, we support, all these horrible countries. Now we're trying to enter into a trade agreement with Malaysia, which has been, horrible on literally on slavery and sex trafficking, and we're trying to partner up with Malaysia. It's like, but at the same time, we're like, oh, but Assad, Syria, they're bad, and Ukraine, they're bad too. And it's just, it's crazy. It's Orwellian stuff.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say about that is the only thing I'd encourage people to do is just tell people that we're the number one oil supplier, because I don't think like the majority of Americans fully understand that we are the number one. Like, because a lot of people look at Iraq and look at all those other different countries, and we've been so desensitized to just relate oil to those countries. So to think, okay, well, we've done all this to be able to get this oil here, when we could just be supplying it all at home and still be having a negative effect on our environment. But I think it would definitely kind of change people's perspectives on the oil game immensely. Like, definitely. So tell everyone. Yeah. We're
going to be putting out a story tomorrow. And then it all comes down to this petrodollar stuff. And like the whole reason why they have to do all these crazy things and kill all these people and start these civil wars is because if they have to preserve this petrodollar system. If they don't, our entire economic and way of life, our economic system, our monetary system, our way of life, it's going to all be either, it'll all have to change if we fail to preserve the petrodollar.
Yeah.
The petrodollar, does it benefit Americans? Yes, because we are the world's reserve currency and we get that Roman citizen effect. Mm-hmm. But it's morally horrible to continue to do.
And it could be one of the things that kind of ends up destroying us, like the
and it's pissed so many people off that it just makes us more vulnerable everywhere we look. I'm going to touch on a couple more news stories here. There is this woman out in Kansas. Her name is Shona Banda, and she made headlines recently because her son was in school, and keep in mind, she's got Crohn's disease, and she uses cannabis to treat it, and it made her a lot better. Yeah. She tried all the pharmaceutical drugs and stuff, and none of it helped, made her sick, this, that, and the other. She started using cannabis, and it really helped her out a lot. So then her kid was in school, and the DARE program comes in, they're telling everybody, oh, don't smoke weed, it'll kill you, this, that, and the other. And the kid's like, that's not true, my mom uses it, and it made her healthy, she was sick. And the school was like, oh, really? Like, your mom uses this stuff? Okay. And they reported it, and then the authorities ended up going to the woman's house, busted her, they found her with a pound of weed and, oil and, who knows what, CBD oil and that kind of thing. And she was her maximum sentence, and she's going to be charged. She just got charged, actually. Her maximum sentence was 30 years in prison. 30 years. And she got sentenced today to 17 years.
That makes me literally want to rip my hair out.
It's crazy,
that's
crazy.
I mean, and the thing is that just shows you the war on drugs is affecting people in a much more negative way than I think they could have ever imagined. Like, I mean, it's literally putting people that are taking this for a medical reason in jail. It makes zero sense.
Exactly, and it is a huge war on drugs fail, and it's really a transgression of freedom, because you can't really sit there and tell someone what they can and can't put into their body when it's their own choice. And then at the same time, you feed them all these drugs and all these pharmaceuticals and opiates and all these horrible things, and they're like, oh, but you can't put weed in your body because we're going to throw you in the slammer for 17 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a story that just happened. I mean, I don't know what else can be done. We had a petition. We posted yesterday an article with a petition. It already had over 100,000 signatures, which even requires White House recognition.
Was she married at least? So someone's like there to help take care of the child?
No, and the other thing is, as well, they took the kid away too. The state took the kid. The Child Protective Services took the kid from her. And,
Wow.
yeah, it's just pretty much horrible at every angle. And now she's going to go to jail for 17 years. And
Like, I mean, I definitely, I partake, and I usually don't have like a pound at my house at a time. Like, I would be stoked if I did all the time. Like, that would be fucking awesome.
yeah, unfortunately, as bad as California is, we're not that on drugs, man.
Yeah, like
you kind of get away with that stuff with the slap on the wrist.
Yeah, like, but I mean, I lived in Utah for a year and a half, and I mean, even just smoking a cigarette there, you felt judgment. Like I always joke around about, like, that's the only place I felt like I could be walking down the street smoking a cigarette, and like people are like, I might as well have a crack pipe in my mouth. Like it's crazy, dude. But
Utah's dominated by Mormons, right? Which is a really, really conservative wing of Christianity.
Yeah, I mean,
and they don't even allow people to use caffeine, right?
No, and they have some interesting rituals. Like they do like a baptism of the dead, where they'll take like people that like weren't part of the Mormon church, and they'll take a member of the Mormon church and baptize them as that person, so that person can go to heaven. So they have some interesting, but I mean, what's crazy about it is if you look at a lot of their rituals, a lot of them are Mason based, because the leader, the guy that started Mormons, what's his name, Joseph Smith, was a Mason. Like, so a lot of those kind of ritualistic kind of fundamentals influenced that religion a little, probably too much.
Yeah, man, I don't doubt that, dude. But yeah, I mean, this whole drug war thing, it's become such a mess, and it's depriving so many people, and it's horribly racist as well. It targets minorities, and even this woman here, just a single white mom, dude, and she's getting subjected to it. And I think that the society, though, is coming around, and they're starting to say, society as a whole starting to say, okay, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Now we got over half the states now at least allow some type of medical marijuana.
Yeah.
You got Florida, you got Colorado, Washington, Alaska, and now even Washington D.C.
Yeah, Washington
which
D.C.
allows recreational use cannabis and stuff. So you could literally get away with smoking it, even if you're not, even if you don't have your prescription, card, or even if you don't make up some bogus excuse to
I have glaucoma.
I remember when I first got my med card here in California, man, I went down there and I complained of having migraines and stuff, which was partially true. Yeah. And they were quick to write me a prescription and stuff.
Yeah. Mine might have been signed by the doctor before I saw the doctor. Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember.
We're having problems here connecting with our other caller. Wait, I think he's on.
Gentlemen.
Oh, there
What's
you are.
up?
Man.
Evening.
Good evening.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah. So, Lou, before we go to you, I do have a caller on the line from 443 that's been waiting for a while here. I want to get to the caller first to see what you wanted to talk about. Did you want to chime in on anything we were talking about earlier, or you want to talk about something else?
I mean, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
443, go ahead.
I'm down for whatever, man. I was just jumping on, into the conversation.
Cool, man. Well, then we're going to go right to Lou. Lou's an awesome journalist. He works with us at the Anti-Media. He also works at Examiner. He's also the editor-in-chief of RuthlessPolitics.com as well?
I'm the editor-in-chief. I'm the acting editor of WTF Magazine. Lots of different stuff. I'm also around the Facebook page, We Survive Bush, You'll Survive Obama. If anybody wants to check that out, it's a nonpartisan page.
Nice, man. Lou's rating out of Las Vegas. I'm gonna hopefully see you later this month. I'm sure that's going to be interesting. Last time we connected out there, you made a kid cry in the lobby of the hotel, man. I mean, he wasn't a kid though. I mean, he was probably like 23 years old, but I remember you made him cry because he was being derogatory towards women and he was being racist, and you called him out on it. And he literally was sitting there trying to get me to defend him against his transgressions and stuff, and he literally started crying. That was pretty entertaining.
I wish that would have been recorded because I'd watch that shit.
So Lou, we wanted to bring you on tonight to talk about some 2016 action, and everyone's aware of Hillary Clinton and how much of a POS she is, and
absolutely
the Republican field is looking crazier and crazier every day. I mean, who's the latest guy? Lindsey Graham, and what was his tagline? Don't vote for me if you don't want to start another war.
Lindsey Graham's greatest quote was that he said he was going to have a rotating first lady, but if you actually look at his personal life, you can't really connect him to any women. And Lindsey Graham has been, not that anybody gives a shit about sexuality, but he's been suspected of being gay for a very long time, and now he comes out and says, no, I'm going to have all types of women in the White House, which I think is kind of overcompensating for his weakness.
Well, what was kind of scary is I read an article on it, and he said that, well, I could have my sister fill that role, and I'm like, oh man, that sounds kind of really nasty, dude.
That might be a little backwards.
Come on, man. Get the hell out of here.
That's
he has no chance anyway. And the way I see Lindsey Graham, dude, all he is he's going to be put up there in the debates to shift the debate extremely far neocon right, so that they can make whoever it is that they're going to have as a nominee come off as a moderate, whether it's Marco Rubio or one of these guys. I don't know who it's going to be.
I think it's going to be Rubio.
But they're definitely bringing in these guys like Bush and these guys like Lindsey Graham, so that it makes it look like Marco Rubio is not a lunatic. I mean, these other guys are lunatics. But Marco Rubio, he only wants to bomb 4 countries, not 3. Or he only wants to bomb 4 countries, not the whole world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, Lou, we wanted you to come on tonight to talk about a lesser-known candidate, but I think one of the best in the field, especially the best in the Democratic field, which is Bernie Sanders, and he's underplayed by the media. He's in many ways written off as a type of Ron Paul type of figure, and the media likes to say, oh, well, he has no chance. Yeah, he's cool and people identify with him, but he has no chance and this, that, and the other. But I think that that's completely false, and I think that in a vacuum, I think anyone has a chance. And out of the Democratic side, I think Bernie Sanders definitely has the best ideas. So what do you think about Bernie Sanders, and what do you want people to know about him?
Well, I know this is a program where there's a lot of anarchists, a lot of anti-government individuals, and I would like people to realize the severity of the situation that we're in our country. The economy's ruined, the environment is in shambles. We're at a tipping point right now where us today, right now, we have the last chance to try and right this ship. And every single candidate who's out there, I mean, you listed these ridiculous Republican candidates, and you're right, they're drawing the conversation to the right to make them seem reasonable. Bernie Sanders is the only candidate, by the way, who's vowed to not accept a single dollar of corporate donations, whereas every other candidate is lining up on their hands and knees to see how much money they can get from these corporations. And it's very strange, because you talk to people, 80% of the American public believes that they need to get money out of politics. And then at the same time, the argument for why they'll vote for a candidate is because the candidate can raise the most money. So it doesn't make any sense. So Bernie Sanders is the only person who's not going to be accepting corporate money and who's doing very well right now in raising money grassroots style, $10, $20 at a time from the American people.
I think you could probably say the only presidential candidates that's doing that, like in history. That's not taking corporate money. For a long time.
Well, and I understand, because listen, I was listening to the show. You guys were talking about all the atrocities of the United States government manipulating the Middle East, keeping the region in chaos. And if you look at our current set of legislators, listen, they're nearly all scumbags. They're nearly all beholden to financial institutions and to corporations. And it's been this way for 100 years. So it's very difficult for people to be able to say, well, this politician's going to be different. Bernie Sanders is going to be different because we've been spoon-fed nothing but thousands of liars for the last 100 years. So people will say to themselves, why should I even participate? Why should I even bother with this? Because he's just another scumbag. But they'll compare him to Obama's presidency because, as you mentioned, and as I agree with you, we were robbed with the Obama presidency. We're still being robbed now. He's expanded the surveillance state. He's expanded the war on terrorism, the drone war. And people compare Bernie Sanders to Barack Obama, but I just don't think that's fair. Because Barack Obama, he was an unknown. He did one term in the Illinois Senate. He didn't finish his term as a United States Senator. He didn't have much of a record to run on. So when he said he was going to do something, then it turned out he was a liar. We didn't have much to go on. We were taking his word for it because he was so charismatic. And, after he won the election, the agency that was working on his campaign, they won the Propaganda of the Year award, for advertising, for turning Obama into a brand.
Did you see that guy, the guy that designed the Hope poster? He rescinded his support for Obama recently.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He did.
I thought that was pretty
and
incredible.
I praise him for having some principle, man.
No, absolutely.
And that's the thing is, I definitely want to go out there and state my position. I really don't believe in the institution of government that much.
I want to get into that too.
Failed and stuff like that. But what I do respect about Bernie Sanders a lot is that, as you were saying, he's principled and he's pretty much held the same positions for most of his career. And he definitely has a lot more credibility and at least a lot more evidence of where he stands than Obama did. Obama came in mostly on rhetoric, very little substance. He was charismatic and stuff. But Bernie Sanders, although I disagree with him in some things, his positions are known and he's open about it. He's openly a democratic socialist, and that I respect him for. You know, and I think that's a very respectable point of view. And just to play devil's advocate here, and as I said, I'm not a supporter much of any political party or anything like that. On the other side of the spectrum, you have also another candidate like Rand Paul, which to me is kind of like the guy that's being treated how Bernie Sanders is being treated by the Democrats. Rand Paul is that guy that gets treated that way by the Republicans, where it's he has no chance and he's fringe and this, that, and the other. But as many people probably are aware of, Rand Paul is also the one that recently was helping to do the filibustering of the Patriot Act. He did the big filibuster of the drones. Of course, he flip-flopped on that. Mm-hmm. And then, this filibuster of the Patriot Act, it was only, a day later after it officially expired. It expired Sunday night on the 31st of last month. By Tuesday, the Congress had passed the USA Freedom Act, which more or less reauthorized a lot of the egregious spying things. So again, the filibuster was kind of substanceless.
Yeah, useless.
But I think also Rand Paul does put forth some decent ideas, especially on the drug war, foreign policy, and surveillance and all that stuff.
But he has some views to
compare Bernie Sanders to Rand Paul,
and that's one thing that
it's just not a fair comparison. Bernie Sanders reluctantly agreed with Rand Paul on surveillance. But, Rand Paul's a guy that says that it's okay to discriminate against gay people based on religion. It's a giant hypocrisy of his libertarian tenet. It doesn't make any sense. To compare Rand Paul to Bernie Sanders, here's another guy who doesn't have a record to run on. Rand Paul's a newbie in the Senate, right? Bernie Sanders has had the same positions for 40 years. Bernie Sanders voted against the war in Iraq. He voted against the Patriot Act. He's only been in office since 2007, so we didn't have an opportunity to vote against it in 2001 or 2006. He voted against it in 2011. Rand Paul isn't in favor of, like the EPA because he's anti-government. He wants to shrink government. So when we're talking about, we have icebergs calving, or I think that's the term, they're calving and they're breaking off from the Arctic shelf, which is going to cause climate change. It already is. If anybody wants to dispute that, if it's some sort of government conspiracy, I can't get into that with people. But he's against even having an agency in charge of these things. And Bernie Sanders is one of the only senators that says we need to spend more money. We need to do something drastic today, right now. This is the turning point in America. And without Bernie Sanders at the helm, who's going to be the champion to save our planet? Who's going to do it? We're going to have nothing left. That's why I believe it's very important for people of any political ideology, because we all now today need to stand together and band together and put aside our differences of political philosophy to realize that there is only one candidate who's speaking to these issues. And, I know there are a lot of anarchists who, aren't in favor of the government, who want to get rid of currency, and have a different type of monetary system, and I understand that. But the difference between Nick and I discussed this last year when we met in Las Vegas, the difference is that I believe in the good of the government and what the government can accomplish if we have actual honorable people in place. And the problem is that we have not had the opportunity to see this because we've had so many liars and so many scumbag sociopath criminals in government that we've never had an opportunity to see what government would be like if we actually worked for the people, if we actually tried to get everybody an education with free school, with free health care. There's only one candidate who's talking about these things. So to compare,
man, I think you make pretty fair points. I mean, some would say, the EPA, the EPA is already there. I mean, the government's already supposed to be, helping the environment not get effed up. But the big problem that we see, and I mentioned it a little earlier in the show about the FDA, and it's the same with the EPA, and it's the same with almost every government regulatory bureaucracy. It's like just regulatory capture after regulatory capture after regulatory capture. It's where basically the people that are supposed to regulate and make sure that the environment's not getting messed up. Well, why are the panels made up of people from the oil industry and things like that? It's like, why is fracking running rampant everywhere and people literally having to throw themselves in front of the entrances of these fracking places to put it to a stop? Because it seems to me, and where I like the kind of philosophy I come from, man, it's that from history, like we've been seeing this like pretty much over and over again since the advent of civilization. I mean, it's been 4,000 or 5,000 years since we've had organized government of some sort, whether it's monarchy or whatever. For the most part, man, we've been basically under a very similar ruling government for the last several thousand years, and there's been definite steps forward, like in progress. And you look at the Greeks and you look at the Romans at first, and then you look at the U.S. Constitution and how like it has somewhat of a positive impact, right? But I think at the same time, in the end, you start seeing the repeated tendency of oligarchy emerging over and over again, right? And so that's why I think a lot of people have like lost a lot of faith in the government, is that no matter whatever they call it, whether they call it communism or fascism or capitalism or democracy or whatever, in the end, throughout history, it's almost always devolved into an oligarchy, And so how do we actually prevent that?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues, at least for America, is we've completely lost our roots. Like one of my favorite like historical literature pieces is the preamble of the Constitution. And if even half of Americans understood and really grasped what the preamble of the Constitution says and promotes, the world would be so different, because it's we the people of the United States, order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure our nation, and secure our liberties, to ordain and establish this as the preamble. Like just that little piece, like if we just understood that, it would be huge.
Lou, you got about 20 seconds. Any last words, Lou?
I got a lot of last words. Listen, everybody needs to vote for Bernie Sanders. I understand that the government has done horribly atrocious things, but here's a guy who's running as an independent Democrat. He's running as an independent in the Democratic Party. He doesn't associate with any party. He has support from libertarians, from right-wing conservatives. He should have support from anarchistic people too, because socialism and anarchism aren't that far apart. It's unfortunate we can't get into the bottom.
Thank you everyone for calling in. Peace.
Yo, here we go through the stereo.